Sword of the Stranger is a celebration of combat in the most mouth-wateringly executed way possible. If that sounds like something that'll get y'all riled up, oh yeah, I'm Demolition D+, welcome to my review, Sword of the Stranger, then stick around. I like to think that I peruse a very broad spectrum of the Universal Media Library, and when it comes to anime, there's no exception to that rule. What I mean is, I feel like enjoyment can come from just about any genre or subject matter, so long as the delivery is up to par with my standards. And I believe that there are many different aspects of film that can make a movie, quote-unquote, good. With that said, let's take a minute to talk about why I think Sword of the Stranger is pretty fucking good. Stranger is a 2007 film directed by Ando Masahiro, who's previously worked on other critically acclaimed films and series such as the Cowboy Bebop movie, Ghost in the Shell, Full Metal Alchemist, Metropolis, The End of Evangelion, Kanan, Hanasaka Iroha, and even Sailor Moon. It goes without saying that this dude has some experience. Stranger is animated and developed by Studio Bones. Does the name ring a bell? It should. Bones is a group of very noteworthy talent, both in their production design and creativity, but quite frankly, you can shove all that because there's one area where I believe Bones and Mr. Ando do not get the praise they deserve. They are masters of choreography. This rebounds back to what I said earlier about what makes a film good. A fight scene or action sequence can certainly be taken for granted by anyone just looking to see a plot get from one key element to the next, but choreography is something very important depending on what's being presented, and Sword of the Stranger, as a celebration of combat, is a movie that takes its choreography very seriously, like, yo, we're gonna get to the next key plot point, but first let me show you how awesome I am. And quite frankly, I believe that's something that a lot of these cut and paste comment-oriented shows could use a lot more of. Did you see my Bayonetta review? Perfect example of choreography done subpar. But of course, there's also a story that goes along with this movie, you know, if you're into that sort of thing. Kotaro and his faithful dog have escaped the clutches of an evil Chinese empire that needs him for a certain evil ritual thing, and along the way he meets up with Nanashi, or No Name, a wandering has-been samurai who has vowed to never again unsheath his blade because he's just too deadly. So the whole movie, you're just like waiting for him to unsheath his blade. Kotaro enlists his aid, and after much reluctance, the two embark on a journey to the nearest town while evading the Chinese and the Japanese government in league with them in the process. Sword of the Stranger is a movie about trust, friendship, betrayal, shirtless men, being angry 24/7 because your dad didn't hug you enough, because he's dead, historical accuracy, being an ungrateful little asshole, occasional bad Chinese voice acting, being a noisy little prick, and all that fluid choreography. Ooh, I have an erection now. Stranger's the perfect movie to just sit down and watch if you don't want to think too hard, yet also has some of the best rewatchability I've ever come across. You can see it in one go and think you've gotten everything there is to experience, and then on your way through a second time, pick up on things that you may have missed, usually little things. For example, and I'm doing my best not to spoil anything here, there's a fight scene towards the end where midway through the two engaged in combat switch swords. I didn't even notice it happened. Then after that, if you zoom in and enhance the video, you can see that every time they clash, they go in for a kiss. No, I'm fucking with you. That doesn't happen. Naoki Sato composes some of the hypest tracks you will ever hear, and he's also worked on a lot of good projects in the past. But this soundtrack in particular, this ambiance, the pickups, the climaxes are all so powerful and underappreciated. There are some moments in this movie that just would not have hit the emotional high points that they do without this musical direction, and the influence it has on the film's overall tone and atmosphere is astounding. It is composition done flawlessly. It's also the music I've been using throughout the duration of this review, so if you've been sitting here like, oh wow, that sounds pretty pleasant, well, there's your answer. Yes, presentation certainly is Sword of the Stranger's most attributive quality, and among the music and animation that lends to the presentation is the legitimacy of the world being portrayed. For whatever reason, they decided to have the majority of the movie take place in early winter. Where many historical anime such as this might portray a shining, sunny, feudal Edo period, Sword of the Stranger takes liberty to show us a much colder, wetter, dreary season. Much of the movie just feels gray and wet, and it's obvious that this was a conscious decision that was made, and it helps to separate the film's look and feel from other anime in the same genre. Again, it's Studio Bones, so the animation is pretty top-notch, and CGI is seldomly used in between for some very curious shots that don't last long and look as though they may have just been thrown in at the last second. For the most part, the plot isn't going to win any awards for creativity, but the message being delivered is obvious and the story passable enough due to the extremely likable characters helping to see it through. There's a sort of father father-son thing going on between Nanashi and the boy, and you really get the feeling that he is helpless and that this wandering Ronin is both his lifeline and a mentor-type figure as the two grow to trust and understand one another's background. And oh look, he's teaching him how to ride a horse. That's cute. The story borders on science fiction with the influence of ancient rituals and a super drug that causes its users to feel no pain, but for the most part everything feels very authentic and conflicts come off as meaningful, powerful, hyper-violent, and very weighty as they should. Still, it's not perfect. Sometimes it feels like the movie is just wasting time to get from one brilliant set piece to the next, and when that is your main appeal, it's somewhat understandable. There's also a sort of side story that manages to surface every other transition between Nanashi and the boy and the Chinese warriors, with a Japanese shogun and some younger guy who's in love with a princess who has like one line of dialogue or something. And again, very minor spoilers. There comes a point towards the end of the film where he's like, "General, I have something to ask of you. If we win this fight," and the general's like, "The princess's hand in marriage is yours," and they're all, "Yeah!" And the viewers kind of just left sitting there like, oh yeah, I guess there was a sort of romance subplot going on. Who's this guy again? And unless they're planning to incorporate this into future sequels or something, it just seems totally tacked on. Still, there's never a moment in this movie that feels boring or too out of place unless you're incapable of appreciating purist, realistic, high-octane limb-cutting and beautifully expressive combat execution. It is very unlikely that Sword of the Stranger will rub you the wrong way. It's animated swordplay ballet at its finest, and the conclusive one-on-one scrimmage that follows the mob battle at the end of the movie is a perfect example of what every action movie's conclusion strives to be. There is a formulaic schedule that many action-heavy films like to stick to leading up to a climax, and it's one that works pretty well if you play it safe, but can be underwhelming if you're too predictable. And while Stranger plays it safe, and maybe doesn't even try to be unpredictable, it is anything but underwhelming come that final fight sequence. I hope I'm not hyping this up too much, that would be horrible. As you may know, I mentioned Sword of the Stranger in my top must-see anime movies list a while back. Don't go watch that if you haven't already. It was the very first video I recorded my voice for, and it's embarrassingly terrible. And as such, I feel the film really hasn't gotten the praise it deserves. I wasn't able to find a review on YouTube that had over a couple thousand views, so I'm just glad that I could get the word out for this fun, heartfelt, and action-packed experience. As always, go to the Facebook. You think I'm playing, just go. My channel is constantly on the verge of being taken down. Unfairly. And if and when it goes, that is definitely the first place I'll go to let everyone know what's going on. Check out my Should You Watch mini recommendation series if you haven't already. And hey, I feel now is as good a time as any to mention that I'm a huge fan of story. Did you know that? I even write stories sometimes, and because I can't seem to find a publisher to take me in, I will likely be self-publishing my own stories here soon on Amazon or Kindle or Audible or whatever people do. So if that sort of thing interests you, stick around because I'll probably be making a video or something about that in the near future. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you decide to check this movie out due to my recommendation, I do hope you enjoy yourself. Please let me know what you want me to review next in the comments, and have a good one.